Hey everyone, the name is Kris. Welcome to Gear Corner. Today we're checking out the amp that literally blew my mind in January at the NAMM show in Anaheim. This doesn't happen very often anymore, this kind of excitement where I know I just have to have it. You know I love gear, it's kind of obvious, but that kind of excitement is special, and that happened to me when I tried the Friedman Plex. I'll tell everything about it, but first let's hear it. Since January I was waiting for the Plex, because right after I tried it and I shot that video for Toman with Dave, I was like, I don't care what I have to do, but this has to happen. I have to have the Plex. So what is this amp? Basically, the story behind it is that Dave has an original, I think 1968 Plexi. It's a 50 watt amp, and he loves that amp. That's his like sort of reference amp, I guess. And he wanted to recreate that amp, and not by copying every single component inside, but going for a sonic recreation, which means that he did change some things inside and use some modern technology, but the goal was to get to a point where the two amps are just identical tone-wise. Before I start tweaking the knobs, let me walk you through the rig. It's going to be the guitar. You'll see which one. I will swap guitars, of course, and plug in the Strat and whatever. If I have any pedals active, you'll have it on screen. You'll see it. For the intro track, I did not use anything. Then I go into the Plex, and then I go into the aux box. And with the aux box, I'm running a 4x12 greenback loaded Marshall cab. Let me show you the same setting as what I used in the intro track, this time, of course, without drums and bass. This is the highest sensitivity input, and the volume 2, the warm woolly channel, is completely on 0, right? Channel 1 is around 7. It's not cranked completely, but it's already a good amount of gain, especially with the Les Paul. Let's start with the front panel, and let's go from left to right. The first switch is the power switch, but it's a 3-way. In the middle, the amp is off, and in the upper position you have the full voltage. It's like a normal Plexi mode, and in the lower setting you have that Variac mode where it drops the voltage. The low end is a little tighter, and the feel is a little spongier, more enjoyable to play, I guess. That's the lower setting. That's what I have the amp at most of the times, because I mean, it's just awesome. Right now I am in the low voltage mode on this switch. I will play again something and then switch it back to high voltage mode, which is the no Variac original Plexi kind of setting on the amp. It is definitely punchier, has a little more low end, and just overall little more of everything, which makes a lot of sense because the amp just gets more voltage, more juice to work with, which again, it's just a different flavor, very close, but the playing feel is different. The first knob is the MVC, which is a post phase inverter master volume. This allows you to reduce the volume without reducing the amount of gain you get from channel 1 or channel 2. Next one is the presence control. That's obvious, doesn't need a lot of explanation. Bass control, same thing. Middle control, don't be afraid of cranking it because Plexis don't have a lot of mid-range. Especially if you start scooping it, it will sound very scooped, which is a cool sound, but if you want to get heard, I recommend cranking that thing. Then the treble, which does not need any explanation. And then you have the volume knobs for both channel 1 and channel 2. It's called volume 1 and volume 2. Now the good thing is with this amp is that they've removed that bright cap from volume 1, from channel 1, which is usually super bright unless you crank it fully. Most people don't really enjoy that channel alone, unlike an original Plexi, because of that bright cap. Now it's off on this amp unless you engage it. For that you have the bright three-way bright switch for both channels, actually for volume 1 and for volume 2. Honestly, I keep it off, like I keep both bright switches off for both channels because the amp just definitely has enough presence and brightness, and it's a much more balanced way of being able to, use the amp at any volume, at any given gain setting. Amazing stuff. Of course, if you want to have like the exact original tone, you can engage the bright switch on volume 1, and then, it's like the original old Plexi. It's not muffled, it's not harsh, it has enough gain, but you still have to work it. It's not super high gain and doesn't compress at all for like a higher gain sound, of course, which already compresses, but that's another story. You pick less heavy-handed and it's almost crunchy clean. You roll back the volume and it's sparkly clean. Oh, God. I am plugged into the high sensitivity input, which is the higher gain option. I'll play something and then plug the guitar into the low input to show you what difference that makes. It's definitely not the kind of amp someone buys for the amount of features. Clearly, it's if you need multiple channels and want to get a lot of features for your money, it's the wrong amp. Clearly, it's one of those that you buy for the feel and the tone and for the simplicity, if you know what I mean, because there's not a lot of gear around that doesn't need tweaking to sound great. This is the kind of amp you set everything at 12 o'clock, it's going to sound awesome. If you crank all the knobs, it's going to sound awesome. You'll just have more gain. Yeah. I'll stick to the same setting and try some drive pedals and a fuzz to see how it takes pedals. By the way, the plate reverb and the delay is coming from the aux. I turned the delay on and off, but the reverb was on all the time because it just feels much nicer to play alone at home in a studio with some sort of a reverb. But since the amp's power amp is distorting, the only chance you have to have a clean time-based effect is to have it after the amp. In this case, the aux box is taking care of that because, first of all, it's a power load, so it brings down the signal of the amp to like a line level signal, and then because it has some built-in effects, I was able to engage the plate reverb and some delay. I wanted to show how it's possible to add those kind of effects to an amp like this, whether it's an original Plexi or a AC30, whatever it is, like an old amp that sort of distorts in the power section. It doesn't allow for a usable effects loop, but you can get around it. You can get, as told, the power station. The Friedman power station has an effects loop. You can put your pedals in there or use anything like the aux box, and then you can have your line signal coming out of the aux box and go into time-based effects, and then going to the mixer or the audio interface, or of course just use the effects built in the aux. That's a great option as well. My thoughts on the Friedman Plex. Now, this is obviously a very biased non-review at this point. It's more of a love song. It's similar to the video that I made on my Rev Dynamis amp. It's just too perfect for me to even try to stay unbiased and like neutral. But what I can tell you is that it's not made for those who want to have a lot of features. I'm not even talking about MIDI, but even like an effects loop or multiple channels or whatever. I mean, you can probably run both inputs and then use an AB box to have more or less gain, but that's also going to change the volume, not just the amount of gain. So I think this is literally the kind of amp that only serves those well who are huge Eddie Van Halen fans, clearly, or those who just want an amazing British voice Plexi style amp that sounds like the old ones but is much more reliable than the old ones, and you know what you're getting, because a lot of the old amps are like in questionable state, let's put it this way. It's the kind of old amp built new that a lot of people are looking for. It's not cheap, of course, but it's reasonable for what it is. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to make it sound cheaper than it is. I'm just saying that like custom transformer, all the right parts, built-in Variac, built-in master mod. It's like a heavily modded perfect old amp, which if you want to compare price-wise and reliability-wise, it's going to be a tough one. That's what I would compare this the Plex with, and not with you know, a Line 6 Helix with a Plexi kind of preset, which is, of course, going to be awesome as well, but it's just for a very different kind of player. And that's fine. That's awesome. Let me know what you think about the Plex in the comments below, and I'll say goodbye and then grab the Les Paul and play some terrible interpretation of some Eddie, because you got to do EVH with an amp like this. Take it easy, and thanks so much for watching. See you next week.